Good morning, good evening, good timings, everyone. We're so happy, as always, to have you with us. This is our ninth discussion, and we always start with introducing ourselves. Andrea, would you like to go first?
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Stringer. I'm in Sydney, Australia, and it's Friday night at 9 o'clock. So, yeah, it's been a great week of writing. I'm doing my doctorate on the role of coaching early career teachers. So I can't believe we've had 9 sessions over the years, but it's wonderful. I love this time together with all my friends. Trista, do you want to...
Hi, everyone. I'm Trista Holwick, and we're really missing Maria, but so happy to have Catherine joining us today. So we have a different face joining, and we're really thrilled. I'm here in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. It's 5 a.m. I do this because I love these conversations. And I look forward to them. And I apologize if I look like it's 5 a.m. But that's how I feel right now today. But things are busy. And I work at the University of Ottawa and lead a policy learning network and also a Canadian Playful Schools network. So I'm having a great time learning with and from schools all over Canada who are engaged in play. How about you, Rania?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm originally from Jordan, currently living in Qatar, currently working in Dead Children Museum in Qatar, enjoying this kind of outreach activities as what we're happening around us today. Have PhD in education leadership, and I'm so excited just to go through our discussion for today, especially that we're hosting Catherine. Catherine, you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, it's been on the hop. I do like spontaneity, as I said. So I'm glad to be here. I'm coming to you from Melbourne. I'm here probably because I'm a bookaholic, and I'm particularly passionate about anything that's related to, I guess, psychology. So and motivation in particular. So here I am following a passion.
Yay.
Yeah. Well, this book actually came from ACEL. I went to a conference and heard from Amy, who zoomed in for us. So when I heard this book, I went, oh, this might be something that us ladies might be interested in. So
Great. And you're always suggesting amazing books, and we're allowing our audience always to connect with us. Scan please this code and share with us where's your location, what kind of ideas or memories that you'd also like to share with us regarding this book. So we're ready to start. As you had mentioned, Andrea, this is the book that had been selected. And I'm sure that many had listened to Amy Cuddy, a famous TED Talk about this book. And she's from Harvard Business School professor, her psychologist, as Catherine had mentioned, will take us a lots of study during this book. A quick overview within the 11th chapter, trying to define what is presence, and we will just tackle it quickly. Believe in your own story and going through those steps, till fake it, till you make it, or till you become it. So are we ready to start?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go.
Who wants to start first with the three of the best questions? The 3 words that best describe you. I'll start because I had a look at this afternoon and I thought, what are the 3 words? And I went with relational because I seem to come back to that. I'm always about being with people, collaborating with people and reaching out to people. So connecting. Curious was another one. I'm very curious, and I think that sometimes takes me down to rabbit holes, and I think Catherine can relate to that as she finds something she likes to investigate. And the other one is trustworthiness. I think that was another one that I sort of stick with those 3. It seems like keep popping up on my radar. So what about you, Rania?
I always like to describe myself as a continuous learner. I'm also like, connecting and engaging with different networks. That's why different hats that I'm wearing with all the networks that I'm sharing. And I also always like curiosity and exploring. I differentiate between learners with asking and, going back to basics around that. Andrea, Trista, Catherine, what would you like to share with us?
Go ahead, Catherine.
3 words. I've just spotted it. I would have loved another 2 seconds to think, but 3 words that best describe. Okay, as an individual, I'd say curiosity would be the top, optimism a close second, and perhaps flexibility or adaptability would be the 3. What's unique about you that leads you to your best performance? I guess it's like you both have said, it's the social aspects of learning with people. I find that good, hard fun, and I can't resist it. And my signature strengths that probably contribute to that are, and the top of it would have to be appreciation of beauty and excellence wherever I find it.
Beautiful. And it's fun to see all the connections between all of us. I've said my 3 words would be similar to the relational, but very much collaborator. So one of those, engaged, so very engaged in what I'm focused on, and deep curiosity. So it's interesting. Curiosity sort of spans all of us as we go through. And then I'll continue on as Catherine did with the unique about you that leads to your best performance. I think that is working with others. Like I see the value in others really, and I think that ends up leading to my best performance because hopefully we bring out the best in one another. And signature strengths, I was asking before, are we using ones that are outlined in the book, or are we using the VS strengths that we might have done through coaching? And a lot of those come together, but for me, it really is that love. Love comes up as my signature strength that drives that connection and relational element. How about you, Rania? And then we'll end up with Andrea.
I think it just, to clarify for whoever is sharing with us and joining us today, is that those questions had been early in the book. And whatever the author, she always goes back to research and some of the tests, psychological tests that she's encouraging us. But I will go back to what you, Andrea, had shared with us. Sometimes we need to redo this test or retest ourselves to re-identify what's the best of ourselves to see if there's anything had changed across the years. For me, learning is still consistent. But sometimes it's to what extent that we engage or the ways that we best perform might differ according either to the place or to the job or sometimes to the networks that we're engaging in. So I find that's really interesting just to give us this space of try different things and not even to focus on one thing, but we might be able to practice or able to experience different ways of best performing according maybe our roles in our families or work or whatever kind of task that or role that we're engaged in. So while they're reading the book, they would see many examples of many ways of testing their selves, their skills, and this is one of them that we try to select and ready to go.
Yeah, well, as I was saying to you before we started, is I did the VIA strengths back in 2018. So I logged into them and I thought, well, that'd be interesting now 4 years later to do them again. But they came up with the same things. In 2018, it was honesty, kindness, and creativity. And then today it was honesty, kindness, the love of learning, and then humility. And I think humility is something that I really gravitate towards for other people. Like I feel that that's a real strength in other people. So it was just interesting that not much had changed, even though I've had a change of 2 different work, spaces and now full-time student. I thought something might have shifted a little bit, but no, strengths are still there.
I always wonder too, when it comes to signature strengths or those driving character aspects, do they change in personal and professional? And I've done the same. I've done them in both contexts and they remain the same. So decisions, or what is that truly at the core, is what drives a lot of the decisions and the work that I do both at home and beyond. So I find that really interesting that it stayed the same for you, Andrea. I'm going to go back and redo mine. It's been a few years, so it'll be fun to see if anything shifted.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to know about it, it's just VIA Strengths. I think you just Google that and it's free. You just have to give your email address. You don't have to give too much information, but it only takes 5 or 10 minutes at the maximum.
I think it's interesting because sometimes we don't keep a record of what we had answered. We just, do the test quickly and then we jump to the other thing. And that's something would remind us, just to see the progress and how to reflect on specific things. The other one that we might also go deeper to just identify how did we use to define these either words or, what are characteristics related to this? Is it the same or it had evolved and changed? So it might be the same word, but it had contained different characteristic behaviors or traits that we're focusing at the moment on. Catherine?
Yeah, I used it a lot with students, and I like to do it, the younger the better. It's sort of a nice little, I don't know, dipstick or measurement of, their core values and how much that sort of is influenced socially past that point. So it's good to do it over a number of times, just to see if and reflect on those, to be self-aware, I guess, of the shifts and what might be shifting your priorities. So yeah, I found them quite useful in teaching.
Yeah,
I
I
also
know. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I went and visited a school and they were using another strength-based. And I said to the students, because we were talking to the students, had it shifted from primary school to high school? Had anything shifted? And there was not
Yeah.
much shift there either. So it was just interesting. Mind you, I wasn't asking everyone. I was just asking a few of the students. But sorry.
Yeah,
Krista?
yeah. No, they,
I was just going to say we've used them in I used it in a master's course I was teaching and so graduate and doctorate students, but for mentoring and coaching. And it would one of the first activities we did. So thinking about your core strengths and signature strengths. And then when you build your mission statement or what exactly around the goals that you're working on for that particular session, how is that embedded in the work that you're doing and in that mission or that core driver for your goal? And then thinking about, if we know that about one another when we're working as coaches, understanding someone's core strengths and signature strengths is so important, because you can understand some of the decisions and the way to connect what they're thinking about and asking those questions to go back. So what, in terms of your signature strengths, how is this decision or this strategy a choice for you, or which one sits best with you? So though I found that a really helpful starting place, and to be able to recognize that in observations, et cetera, when working with people.
I
And
think
as
that
we're
builds.
discussing, yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
No, you go, Rania.
I think that also would help us to focus on our philosophies, educational philosophies. That's not different either at the personal level or at the professional, but it also starts from the core values that we're focusing on and how we're reflecting that within, a kind of daily practices, or we're trying to, as she says in the end of the book, like fake it till you become it. So she starts and discuss the word of presence. These are some of the quotes from the book trying to define it. How did you like find the definition, or you like to add something to the definition?
I like the fact that it wasn't, it was regarded as a state rather than a trait. I liked the malleability that kind of affords, but I was constantly struck by the similarities with flow, Csikszentmihalyi's flow. Almost every time people described, really achieving that synchrony that, she associates with presence, I could substitute the word flow. That the challenges that they were meeting, they felt that they had the capabilities to meet them, and they were feeling challenged as well. So it's not, the similarities of even at looking at this phenomenon, but mainly in evaluative situations, for instance. So there's got to be a degree of stress for you to really experience it. Made a lot of sense as far as flow theory.
That's great. I hadn't made that connection, but it makes a lot of sense. It's the engagement. I really, at the very beginning, I'm like, it's hard to get to the definition of presence. So there's a lot of preamble before, and I will be defining what it means as we kept going through the book. But setting the stage for what it is, because I think if it started with the definition, then you're like, okay, and, I'm not really sure if I'm going to go deep into it. So I found that really helpful to provide a little bit of the preamble to it. And when we're thinking about presence, what struck me is also how it appears to others. So when you are in that state of flow, if we're going to use Catherine, or we're in that state of being, if you are present, then it can feel like either natural or it can be disingenuous for others if you're not, if you're trying something that doesn't quite work. That was really interesting to me, because I also often think about what you've been taught, like in an interview situation, and how you should behave, and how it actually can also have detrimental if it feels inauthentic.
I was a little bit challenged when it said, you know, you're expressing our true thoughts and feelings and values. I sort of felt like sometimes you need that time to process things. So your initial feelings or thoughts may actually change with a little bit of time, but that's when you said that it's not about a trait, it's about a state of where you are at that moment. But yeah.
It's interesting, Catherine, how you selected the word flow, because sometimes we need to be present in our presence. You know, we need to be aware of the way that we're, you know, recognizing our feelings or understanding how are we behaving or acting. So that goes back to the psychology, you know, like if we have thinking, feeling, acting triangle, and then we see which one is affecting the other one. And to what extent are we really cautious about, you know, those things working all together as a state or as a process. But I like the idea when she started, you know, using the cases or referring to the cases as defining presence and showing us that everyone has their own way of working with it or trying to develop this kind of feeling, acting, also reflecting, which takes us to, you know, like something to reflect or main points if we will discuss or think about when she continuously refers to the top core values and the importance of beating feelings of powerlessness and your posture. Let's discuss those 3 points if you like, ladies, or whatever you'd like to focus on. So core values, feelings of powerlessness, and posture.
I'll just pull up the power one. I just, because I've highlighted power makes us approach, powerless makes us avoid. And I've reflected a lot on that. And in what situations do you feel empowered? And what other people are you around then when you feel more empowered? But that powerlessness that takes us to what, you know, you do avoid situations that might feel uncomfortable.
I kind of the deficit thinking in me made me just crave more information about how we prevent, you know, the whole book is about putting the wind back in the sails of people. It says it won't give you the skills, but it will help you share the ones you do have, right? Especially if you've had the wind taken out of your sails and you lack the secure self-esteem to do this, or if you've got a more fragile form of self-esteem. But I guess what's missing is, okay, what sucked the self-esteem out of your sails in the first place? You know, like what are the suckers that create this need for people to put that wind back in their sails and uncurl themselves and get on with displaying the people that they really are? What took it away in the first place? I don't think you're born sort of rolled up in a ball hiding from people. If anything, you're probably blissfully unaware of the need for that sort of self-preservation. But yeah, so that's kind of where my mind was going, was prevention rather than curing. It's a question that still remains for me.
Well, I'm going to piggyback on what Trista said before when we were talking about identifying people's strengths, right? In coaching, you try and look for the strengths in somebody more than like, what is it that you're lacking or what is it that you're finding a challenge? You know, so I looked at some of it, this, you know, focusing on the strengths, because it said that she was, they fueled her worst fears about herself rather than nurturing her strengths. And that's what I'm thinking in coaching. We're always trying to identify the strengths, which is why we use the VIA a lot of the time. And I just found it, you know, we don't have enough intellectual bandwidth to perform our best when we're trying to think about the critique that we expecting from other people. And I think that's that environment, Catherine, that you're thinking about, who does take that away from you? You know, why don't you have that level of confidence?
I was really struck too, and building on what you're both saying, the impact on children over time. If we do think about young kids, and you know, I'm a mom of 3 kids, so those are who I'm imagining, and I have a pretty precocious and confident 10-year-old daughter. And I, you know, you just really want to hold on to that. So I know I was reading this book with that in mind, because I have kids who have gone through the system already, who are in, you know, teenage world now. But when does that happen? And you see it starting to happen. And so what are those factors? And so somebody working in education, how do we support our community of learners to continue that confidence and that ability to move and keep the power, so that it doesn't become like closing in on oneself and, your body language. And I mean, I was really, to jump into another space around the breathing and the yoga and the mindfulness element, and that's doable. Breathing is quite doable, but if you think about how we breathe and how often, I know that it's something that the mind and body connection that she talks about is something that I've been challenged to think about, definitely. Sometimes I'm not as embodied. I spend a lot of time up here. So how to collect that breathing, but that's doable, right? In those moments, to gain some sense again and opening up that space in your chest.
For me,
Right, yeah.
also, what was interesting since the early in the book when she started with the example about the elevator pitch, and sometimes like you don't recall or you don't really invest in that moment, and that because of your because of imposter syndrome. There are many things that would affect this, but what exactly is preventing us and why? Like sometimes you feel that you're really so natural whatever with talking or being yourself, or sometimes we just lock ourselves in waiting for someone to judge or someone to tell us what we are allowed or what we are able to do. The other thing is the pause, portion or section that she emphasized many about how the body translate or the interpretation of our feelings, our emotion. Sometimes I would disagree with this because we need to differentiate between painful kind of position that you cannot sometimes sit in, and we know that many women would face that in many times of the day, but how we of the month but how we like enable ourselves to feel more powerful than just only focusing on some positions that we're having. And it was really interesting or remarkable within the book when she mentioned the test, that when they asked them to try different positions and then they saw the impact after 2 minutes. So how long 2 minutes is to affect our mind and to affect our body when talking with others. And that will go with everything. That will go with children, that would go with adults around us, and even with our team members. Sometimes they will just feel for a specific moment to speak up, or as you mentioned, Adia, for coaching. So those things that we must reflect on ourselves, but also to help others to achieve it and to get out of the bubble or the ordinary way of thinking and dealing with things, to feel more themselves and to express exactly what they want to emphasize or want they to work on. And that goes back to the human or humanizing our processes or our work environment.
Did you think that there were some
I think Piggy.
cultural, I was wondering about the cultural element, Rania, and I was really interested for your perspective because she does bring up how some of the poses or what we are sort of learnt as children, acceptable for girls, boys. And she used a reference, I think, was a Vietnamese woman who was talking about the experience of it being something against how she was taught how to behave and be in her body. As you were reading that, did you have any reflections, or how did that sit with your experience?
Many, because like I was wondering about the culture element, the religious element, even the preference about herself, what she prefers to, or previous experiences, maybe for kind of sexual harassment or something that they don't want to face. But yes, we need to recognize, what others would prefer. So I liked, for example, University Council of Education Administration, they have this color coding. If you allow someone to hug you, or you don't prefer anyone, to have this kind of greeting. So this is out of respect, maybe due to the culture or maybe due to COVID. I don't know how they started this, but this is something that would allow us to reflect. And many would start asking me, how can we recognize that this woman, Muslim woman, would prefer to shake hands when she greets others, like I'm talking about males, or she prefers not to shake hands? And that's a little bit kind of tricky one, because some Muslim women, they follow the school of thought that they find it's fine, and others they would prefer not. So it's you can generalize and say that this is all Muslim women's. It also goes back either to her, kind of practice or to her kind of culture. So there are many elements. Me, myself, I can't answer this question. So I will just ask them, just for her. If she, would straight her hand, just means that she's fine. If not, just, don't be the one that you're going to start. And that goes with many cultures here, especially in the Gulf area or within the Middle East. If that answers the question.
I have found too, when I lived in America, I was hugged a lot more. A lot of people hugged you just automatically, right? It was, and the first few times I went, oh, and the person I worked with, she goes, you're not really comfortable with this hugging thing. And I said, no, in Australia, we just sort of usually, shake or give a little kiss on the side, which is different again, but still different cultures, which we have to recognize. The one thing that, if you don't mind, I want to go into that confident humility, which I know is Adam Grant's work, but on page 140, she says that confidence without arrogance. When I read that confidence without arrogance, that to me is confidence, but with humility, right? So it's nice to hear that's coming through. And I know with Kirsten's book, Head and Heart, she talks about that as well, being that confident person. And it's really hard to have a leader who is confident, but then has that humility, that heart, that empathy as well. What are your thoughts on that? Confident.
I thought that linked nicely to the stuff she'd said on earlier on page 32 and 33 about fragile and secure self-esteem, because then it plays out. If your worth as a person is too closely aligned to perceptions of other people, you're not going to enjoy that state of humility. You're going to be on the defensive, and when you're defensive, you can't be curious, you can't be open-minded, you can't be open-hearted. So I think, for me, it still goes back to, okay, that comes from a place. Something is said or done or encouraged or discouraged that kind of creates that humility or insecurity that you see in adults. So yeah, I guess, just linking those two was interesting.
You're very curious about what happened before, Catherine. It sounds like everything that you've read in the book, it's like there's a story behind that with every person that you come across that way.
Confidence without arrogance, which is,
At the beginning, I was very sensitive why she's really emphasizing the word power. So the whole book, is there another term that we can use instead of just emphasizing the word power? But during the book, when she was referring and saying it's power to, power over. So that's something that she also tried to clarify. That is how we can, enable or provide the space for others to practice more than just the common understanding of power or, the politics of power. And I know that we ask those questions within our discussion, what resonated or what spoke to you, what kind of questions. So we're already part of, this already. So Andrea, Krista?
I'm just thinking about the power. Yeah, it's an interesting choice of term, and it really is driving the entire discussion around presence, right? They're power poses. And that idea of power to, power over, power with. And I was thinking about how it links to the emotion. So the body creating the emotions, and remembering the example of the study she shared, with how you asked participants to pose in the emotion, and then do that pose or that expression for someone else, and how that impacted others. So it's really this connecting and chain reaction. So if it's power with, like, our own, I guess, confidence without arrogance, which I don't know, that's what I'm still, that's interesting, right? The arrogance piece is really tricky because you can't just be just be confident. So and also be authentic and do it with humility.
That's
And you know, build in with your core strengths and make sure it's relational to someone. You know, like there's a lot of ask in this, but also the power with how we can through our work and in the space that we bring others along. So I was really struck by the way that human bodies and of emotions can impact others, and that says a lot because it, you know, I think I don't necessarily always watch how my body responds to emotions and what that can do to impact others. So I've had me thinking a lot about how I physically am in spaces too, and moments and what I'm projecting. So.
But we
I
don't
like
have a mirror either in front of us. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, your face can say 1,000 things, but you may be not aware of it in that moment, right? Sorry, Vanya.
I would go to the quote on page 28 when she says sometimes you have to get out of the way of yourself so you can be yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
That's a
Like, it's
good-
not anyone else. Let's
Yeah.
start with ourselves first.
But you have to also be in yourself to be in these poses. You very much have to like find your space as well.
That's why I say that sometimes we need to define presence for us, how we see it, because it's about, you know, identifying yourself, your inner self, and away from yourself so that you can be, you know, like this kind of state. So now it will be so psychological, but no.
But on that same page, I thought the key was there. It's believing and trusting your story, your feelings, your beliefs. But I thought that was a missing end of the sentence, not imposing them on others. That's where the arrogance comes in. You know, it's all right to trust your story, trust your values, trust your beliefs. I think the arrogance for me kind of creeps in when you don't have the humility to recognize that that's not going to be everybody's story. You know, everyone's got to finish their own sentence, not just adopt yours.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
it was page 131
I
that
think there was
said the feeling that arises from personal power is not the desire to have control, it's the effortless feeling of being in
Yeah.
control. Mm.
Yeah.
And I think that also was section 5
You know-
when stop preaching, start listening. So sometimes we
Yeah,
jump into
yeah.
advice and we just need to listen and understand, you know, seek first to understand before you understood, to understand before you understood, I forgot the habit.
Yeah.
Seek first to understand, yep. And I also liked in page 65 when she mentioned this quote, as we let our own light shine. So we're going back to
Yeah.
the light and we're going back to this kind of that there's something we have, but how we allowing ourselves to shine and to practice it.
How you share it. Yeah.
Mm. I was going to say, you know, when we're
I
talking
don't-
about the listening, if you ever want to
Mhm.
watch a video, it's not about the nails. Sometimes people just want to be listened to. They don't want the answers. They just want somebody to hear them and talk about. Yeah. So that's available on YouTube if you want to have a look at that. It's not about the nail. Very quick clip about listening.
That's a good one.
Mm.
The paradox of listening. So page 81, when we're talking about, you know, the importance of listening. So that was something I definitely highlighted. So when you stop talking, stop preaching and listen, here's what happens. So
Yeah.
that listening being a really important element in trust and building trust.
Mm.
So we always wonder, you know, trust is so important in so many organizations and leadership and in forward moving together. So how do we do that? So one key element is really that idea of listening. You get useful information, and to me that goes back to the strengths. You know, if you're really listening to someone, you're making connections to who they are, and not listening for your own purpose necessarily. Seeing other people as individuals and even allies. And it just makes me think a lot around right now, it's a sense that we're not all listening to one another. You know, if you have an opposing view, it really does feel like it's a bit of a shutdown. You stop listening. And so that might be an area that is starting to need a lot of work, especially back again, thinking about what we can do in schools. How do we practice listening? And that's a really important skill. So anyway, as we go back to that shining the light and listening and trust, those are key items when we think about presence.
Mm.
One of
I-
the
I
interesting
don't-
qualitative methods I heard about and I'm keen to learn is listening guide methods in
Mm.
data collection. So that's something also I would really love, and I'm, you know, kind of searching of how to learn this technique and way of analyzing of data analysis just to go deeper. So that's something also for researchers if they're interested in exploring different ways of data collection and data analysis. Go, Catherine, sorry for interruption.
I don't know whether you're familiar with the politician in Australia named Penny Wong, but you'd probably get this one, Andrea. We've got an incredible, she's like a Jacinta Ardern, really, or the best we've got in terms of practicing presence, I think. And I just thought of her as I was reading this book constantly, why I admire her, why I would love to emulate her presence, both in terms of, the calm and in stressful scenarios. But one of the things I did to try to encourage it in terms of the team that I was working with was a weekly Penny Wong Award. People who really maintained their principles under stressful scenarios, but did it with grace. And so, they had that low cortisol, but enough testosterone, if you like, to kind of maintain the rage, but not do it in a way that was, I guess soul destroying for others or disrespectful to others. She never, ever expresses disrespect, even though some people clearly, I think, beg for it sometimes. She has this presence under the most stressful situations that's very hard to emulate, but should be rewarded more often. I don't think we reward people who demonstrate some of these skills enough.
I think it's recognition more than reward, Catherine, right?
Yes.
As I was reading this, I'm thinking that the one part, I think it was at the end, like stereotypes and, just knowing culturally, being culturally aware. These days, you have to, I feel it's adults, you have to keep learning. We have to keep learning what's not appropriate, right? Because when I was a child, it was appropriate. Now it's not appropriate. But my children are the ones who keep me up to date with things, because things change and you need to, there's no excuse for ignorance anymore, I think. So, but I think my children have more strength and more awareness of the world, I think, and I learn from them. So I'm fortunate. I feel I'm fortunate. But it's about recognition.
We are all, but Yani, I'm happy that they're sharing this information without saying, no, this is not the way that you used to do it at your times.
Yeah, they do that. But I feel like I'm in a
it's
safe
funny, I was
space
talking
to
with
ask.
I was talking with my son today, and he said, wouldn't it be nice if there was more reciprocal mentoring going on in his workplace? And I sort of said, gosh, it's so good to hear someone of your age and stage still kind of optimistically hoping that we can have that reciprocal sort of mentoring. I think they can become a bit disillusioned with it sometimes.
Or we might call for intergenerational kind of leadership, networking, kind of activities that we have this momentum or this kind of sharing expertise and experiences. And keeping the record, the history of the generation.
We actually have a show over here with the young toddlers go to a older people's home, and now they've just got the teenagers. So it's quite interesting how, the loneliness that's there. But then when they come together, the presence is there, right? Because it's something different, something new. So, yeah.
We go to the last section, unless Trista has something, to mention regarding fake it till you become it. And, the small changes or the steps or, like what was that look with that expression?
I could read Trista's face then.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it was as I was getting to that final chapter, and it's all the case studies. And I mean, obviously, the TED Talk and the work has really impacted so many people, as you can see. And then, but I don't know, the skeptic in me is like a 2-minute pose. Really, so anyway, I guess it's a challenge a challenge to see whether or not the deep impact of something, because we're talking about pretty massive changes that happened or were shared in that last chapter, of all the results from the poses. And I think it's I don't know, I've as I was read, it's a lot more in depth and more complex than holding a pose for 2 minutes. There's so many elements within this idea of presence. So I think I was conflicted at the very end to think, it's not just boiled down into that holding a pose in 2 minutes before going into something really big, for example, that's going to make all the difference. I think it's a complexity and a bunch of different elements that come together. But then again, I haven't exactly been implementing it in my own life. So stay tuned. We'll see. Thoughts? Like, how did people feel to that last chapter? Did it?
I think
it undermined
a sample of one. I'm with you. I'm a skeptic. I've dealt with a power poser who was proud about it and shared that as his strategy for getting where he wanted to get to. And I found it very hard to distinguish power posers from bullies sometimes. If you actually look at the diagrams on 200 and 201, I usually, if I walk into a room of kids where we're dealing with a bullying issue, I look for those posers and I know which one's which, So I think there's a chapter missing, and I think you nailed it. There's a chapter on that ego and humility, building the humility, sort of controlling the arrogance. No matter how long, the sustainability is a concern of mine, but I just think there's a missing chapter on how you get that balance right if you really are a poser practitioner. Because it says, you should go and you do these poses before you receive feedback, for instance. That's where it usually created problems for me, because I could tell that it was affecting the way that he actually received feedback, but not in a positive way. And so, yeah, how they get the balance right, I guess.
Because I think a lot of the things
she tries to explain it within her TED Talk more than the book. But also that remind me within my father-in-law tips for us, when we go and we walk across the door, he would just say, like, raise your head, your shoulders, walk straight, like you're really confident, you're able to do this. So it's not merely about the pose, but it's about as you had mentioned, Trista, it's everything is around and how you think about it.
That's
what
I come.
Yep. So it's not only about I can walk straight, but I still feel or think that I can do it. The same kind of negative kind of self-talking, if we will say it this way. But that goes to childhood or to kind of our personal experiences, something that we really believe in addition to having this kind of powerful kind of moments that we really seek or we try to gain. But even with a smile, I remember when I used, my eldest sister, she would tell me, if you're feeling sad, just try to fake a smile, and then you go to the room and you will be a little bit happier, you will be ready to engage with others. But if you keep the sad face, you will not accept anyone who's, discussing or trying to engage you. And that's something funny I still do with my children, myself, even till this age, regardless of the age. But, at least, you can start smiling, laughing, like 1, 2, 3, until you at least start being open to engage at that degree or that level.
Yeah, I'm sort of the one, to me, it's more about the head than the physical thing. It's what's going on inside.
The self-talk.
And then it's also who I'm with. I mean, I can spend a half an hour with somebody who makes me feel like I can do anything. Do you know what I mean? And I can spend half an hour with somebody who makes me feel like I'm nothing. So that influence of the people around you, I think, is just as important.
So I guess it's around taking that control component, right? So the power that you have, despite what's around you. I think the big takeaway, as I look at the entirety of the book, is really around the mind-body connection. I think what personally, and maybe a lot of the work we do, we spend a lot of time on the head. So, you know, and I do have concerns that we move more and more away from the body, and how we are feeling within ourselves. And if there is such, and they're showing in this, the research is there to show how important the body component is, and how we are breathing, how we are in our positioning. And so that's something to be thinking about. Yeah, everyone's like, okay, but it's a little straighter. We don't talk about it much, you know? So where are we having these opportunities to think about it, to help support, you know, more and more physical education is being taken out of schools. The arts are taking out of schools. This is where you can learn to be in your body. And so we are focusing a lot on the head. So, you know, that's something that the biggest takeaway for me is thinking about that.
You know, I had similar conversation with Prof. Rich Filler, and I shared with him similar discussion about what. Is it really our thinking, or is it our emotion, or is it our behavior that will change? So I shared with him like several stories, and each one of them I was focusing saying that it's the feelings that comes first, and that's affecting the thinking and then the action. But then he will retranslate or redescribe it from his perspective, and then he will say it's the same story, the same incident, but he thinks that it's the thinking, not the behavior, although that I'm the one in that situation, and I'm the one that I shared the incident. And one of those examples, when I was during my FIFA discussion within my PhD defense, I, you know, had the feeling that it was really tough, and their inner voice was telling me, "You're not going to pass. It's over." And then I started looking, you know, to the cloud and out the window. I was hearing their questions, but I was talking to myself, Rania, just enjoy it. This is something happens, you know, like once a life, regardless of the result. This is something, you know, spectacular. You're sitting with them, you're discussing what you had worked for years. So I sit back, relaxed, you know, okay, guys, let's discuss it. And, you know, like even having this feeling, it just brought joy to me again. It's regardless of, you know, what's going to happen or the result, even if the worst case scenario, I'm not going to pass, but you know, sitting with those people is not going to happen again. So let's just focus at this. So for me, it was more about emotions. For him, it was more about thinking. And at the end, it led to a specific action, which someone might say that, you know, it's the act that had also caused this. So regardless, but sometimes we need to lean in or to change something that we're working on. Fake it till you become it, or you know, like you're already becoming it.
And it's a small step, like that mental talk that you were having there, but on a grander scale. I don't know whether you noticed in the references, she talks about Bessel van der Kolk's work, and he's the guy who wrote The Body Keeps the Score. So Trista, if you're really interested in that, it's heavy going. It's how having physical experiences directly contradict people who are dealing with, you know, real traumatic rage, the collapse of power. You know, it's quite extreme, and they're still managing to reverse it, but largely through these physical experiences is how they're doing it. So it's quite convincing. And if you think of what you just described, it's a smaller, you know, more manageable personal version of that conversation in your head, that's changing that sense of helplessness into a more positive place.
So it's all about small steps. We don't think that we need to have something, you know, tremendous or huge, but at least, you know, we need to have this 10% braver or small steps of change. And then in the long run, we will notice the difference, or we will be able to recognize what had changed or what had evolved. Ladies, as we are trying to end this lovely discussion, is there something that you hope to see in the, you know, kind of something related to this book, or you want to highlight before we end our discussion?
I was just going to, sorry, I was just going to mention the one thing when we're talking about the humility and arrogance and things, that page 141, it was, we pay attention to people who control our fate because we want to be able to predict how they'll act. And I was thinking about in the hierarchical world, where you're always knowing more about the people above you because they're going to help you move up, and not the people below you. And I was talking to somebody, and they said, you know, I always take the time to go and know all the people, all, you know, from the people who from the very lower, as in you don't just work with those above, you work and bring others up, but and I'm thinking that's the arrogance that people have and you're not present if you're only worrying about those above. So that just sort of resonated with me, with that whole confidence without arrogance, but still making that presence known to everyone in your world, in your work.
I think that goes back to the idea of a network, that we're connected. Yeah, and everyone, and so that we all are moving. So there's strength and that push and pull, but everyone has a role to play in this sort of connected space that we're in. And so how we are impacts that network and how someone else is, and the importance of thinking about those connections and the ties. So thanks, Andrea. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that.
Catherine?
And I liked what you said, Trista, about just regaining sort of control, not letting others control. So, when you are in that nice dance of collaboration, not to kind of lose that, because if it is that source, if you like, of humility and confidence, you'll do that better. You'll do that networking and have that consideration for others if it comes from a healthy level of self-esteem and self-awareness and self-mastery. So it's interesting how much of the self-awareness contributes to that collaboration.
For me, I liked how she combined all of this research and broke it down to smaller steps that we can relate to our daily lives. But also I would emphasize the importance of not only networking, but also having this kind of critical friends or mirrors that would really advise us or will tell us, it's better if you sit this way, or it's better if you say this way, without, being afraid of criticism as much as just telling us how do we mirror or how do we have that. And this is something that, our religion Islam would really emphasize it, having this another eye, so that we always develop our skills and our behaviors and our way of dealing with things. And that's happened personally when one of my teachers, she said, the way that you sometimes walk, that, would, feel kind of more power for the team, and you're encouraging us to do this and this and that. We might not be aware of even the way that we walk, how much it affects the people around us and give them this kind of strength, or protecting them in a meeting, or way of just allowing them, this is a safe environment and everyone can speak and can participate. But in some sections I would prefer if she avoids just listing all the studies. It was a little bit kind of difficult for me just to go through and said, okay, I would go to see some YouTube to just summarize or to visualize some of those measurements or tests that she was describing. But generally, it's an interesting book, and also how she connected to the cases that came back to her after her TED Talk and some of the stories that she was referring to. And I think it connects also well with the previous books that we had already discussed, like having this kind of progress with the ideas and also the connections that we're having.
It's a very hard balance to get right, though, isn't it? To like how much it's a research informed work. And so showing and making sure that the research is clear, making it like in a book form. So it's not a research paper, it's, like accessible, but how much is too much? So that was interesting, Rania, to like, where that balance is. And it's really hard in these types of books that we want to be really accessible, but also be really clear that this is based on a body of work and like connections with other researchers. Yeah, and I'm really excited to see how this one is able to take up that challenge of it being research based, informed, anchored. I think we're gonna have some fun with this one.
This one, Head and Heart. I've started.
Yeah, you've already got your copy.
Got my copy.
You're so lucky.
I think you're going to love the first chapter because it's the history, right? So of leadership. So I'm not going to tell you anymore. I'll just wait till the next time we all meet.
Well, and I mean, I think, Rania, this will be so interesting as we have just been wrestling with women educational leadership and thinking about that in the Global South or in different contexts, and how this is written by an Australian woman, someone we've looked at before, and I'm really intrigued to see whether or not the voices that sometimes are missing that featured in the work that we've been doing is there. So that I can't wait. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait for our discussion in July. That will be going to be 7th of July, easy date to remember, 7/7. But also it's how to, to reflect on the women education leadership and all the things that we're having, especially that it's very kind of similar experiences, but in different contexts, which really emphasize the importance of sharing, storytelling, coaching or mentoring, and also for having this kind of sense of belonging and presence, if we're connected also to presence. For me personally, as always, I enjoyed this discussion and so inspiring and enabling us to reflect more and more on our practices. And I'm sure that, whoever is watching us and engaging with us would benefit from reflecting and testing their strength and how they describe, their selves, their better selves. Thank you, everyone. Andrea, Trista, Catherine.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank you.